Hi, it's Tim Hagen from Progress Coaching. And this is something I've actually never really done. I've never really thought about coaching the workplace culture in the context I'm about to share with you. I want to introduce you to a concept called the 80% workplace culture. Now, where did I get 80% from? And to really be blunt with you, it all kind of came together in a collage. I didn't do this for marketing. I didn't do this for making up a number, but some of the numbers that kept being revealed in various studies from Gallup, Tasha Eurich, various organizations, I kept coming back around 80%. And it's really interesting. So, what I want to do is I want to walk you through how to build a coaching culture and what are some of the key imperatives. Now, why would I be that person to do that? First of all, I've actually been teaching workplace coaching now for 32 years. I actually have a lot of successful case studies, and I've got some case studies that, looking back, you know what, didn't go as well as we all would have hoped. But there's fundamentally something that happened that I think is really interesting. Recently, I was watching a video by Simon Sinek on the law of diffusion innovation, and he lives by it, but it's also a bell curve. And it was really interesting when he was showing it. I'm like, that's near the 80% number. That's interesting. And he talks about something which I thought was something so parallel to what we go through. See, it happens in our business all the time. Well, I don't know if our leaders are going to buy into the program. And it's just something that just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, because it's like, wait a minute, there is no buy into the program. You either want to coach or you don't coach. If you're not coaching, don't tell me you're doing a better job of engaging and retaining and developing top talent than someone who is coaching. There is no argument. And when people say to me, well, I don't know if I bought into the program. I said, well, if people haven't bought in, great, ignore them. And clients will look at me like, what do you mean ignore them? I said, let's focus on the people who are actually doing it and grow from there. Then I see Simon Sinek's video, which was really interesting. So the 80% workplace culture isn't just a concept. It's a movement that you can create. The 80% becomes your metric. It becomes that thing that you can hold on to. Are we moving in that direction of that 80%? Are we maintaining that 80%? Now, with that being said, I'm going to show some of this to you and show you some recent images from the Gallup recent poll. Do you know that 71% of people in their traditional study are neutral or actively disengaged? Only 29% are actively engaged, meaning they're positive. Now, when we look at the latest, let me pull this graph up for you. This was astonishing to me. So the first one I'm going to show you is feedback. Almost 60% of managers say, yeah, I recognize people for good work, when direct reports are saying, no, they only do it 35%. Provides weekly feedback. Direct report said they do it about 20% of the time. Managers said do it about 50. Quite frankly, I've always told people you should do it about 80% of the time. So then when I look at the next one, and when we look at AI and all the things that are coming, how is AI affecting the workplace? And in their last one, which I thought was really interesting, is the Great Detachment. Overall satisfaction. Look at those numbers. 51%, half of our employees, leaders, are looking for a new job because of detachment. Think about that, everybody. That is a daunting statistic. I'm a leader. Half my people are looking. 7.1 are neutral or actively disengaged, meaning negative. Only 2.9 out of my 10 employees are actively engaged. That's a daunting number. That is a really, really hard number. And so what do we do about it? How do we create a culture that people don't want to leave? How do we create a culture that people want to stay at? The funny thing is that when somebody today wants to go work for company XYZ, do you know they can go on LinkedIn, they can go on Facebook, they can find a friend of a friend, or maybe even a friend who works there and calls up and says, what's it like working for Tim Hagen? What's it like working for Lisa Smith? Our worlds have shrunk. So when someone says, I don't have time to coach, and you call that employee and say, what's it like to work for him? And the employee says, it's okay, doesn't spend much time with us, doesn't really care about our careers, could be the nicest guy in the world. So what do we do about it? I'm going to walk you through a slide deck, and I want you to remember that 80% number. and use that as a measuring stick. Use that as an engagement tool. Use that as a training development tool as much as you possibly can. So when we look at the coaching movement, when we look at some of the things that we need to do, and when you look at this law of diffusion innovation, and this is where I got this from Simon Sinek, but this is a statistic that is pretty transparent to everybody. It's pretty known to everybody that typically when we have a movement and there's change, what happens? 2.5% innovators, 13% early adopters, we're at about 15%. Then statistically, we have an early majority and late majority. Those are the people who say, what's in it for me? Do I get a raise? Do I get paid extra? And when you add up those numbers from that 13% to that 68%, we come to a number of 81%. Now, this is tough for me because I think it's a little bit, I would even say, naive on me when I see that 16 to 20% laggers. Those are going to be the people that you're just never going to convince. And recently I had a client in financial services said, I was talking to this guy, he didn't buy in, he thinks it's dumb, he doesn't want to do it. And I just finally said, then don't make him. I don't want to fight with people. And I looked up his records. Out of 19 months, he had attended one session. Why would anybody listen to somebody who says, nah, I don't think that team's going to do very well? I don't go to practice. It doesn't make sense. So look at this just for a second. Now, as we go forward, I want you to think about some key numbers. Remember this number of 81%. Remember early adopters, the early and late majority, which is 68%, plus that early adopter brings us to 81%. Now, when we look at some other numbers, Tasha Eurich's book I love, in the book Insight, New York Times bestseller, she showed a number of 85%. When she asked people in her survey, are you highly self-aware? 95% said yes. When she tested them, only 10% were. That's an 85% fallout. 85% of people lack self-awareness. That makes it really tough. Now, Gallup reports 71% of people are neutral or actively disengaged. Now, I just showed you the number from Gallup, which is up at 50%. McKinsey did a study that showed 42% of people were actively looking for jobs outside of the workplace. Gallup also reports when leaders lead with positive things or strength-based things, people lead 8 times more. Again, remember that 80% number. Now, one of my favorite studies, because the name of our company is Progress Coaching. Teresa Amable at Harvard said that people are at their most motivated state when they're progressing in their job. Look at that number. We're almost at 80%. The 80% workplace makes sense. That should be our goal. Now, what she found was that when people were writing down when they were at their most motivated state, it had everything to do with, I'm getting better at my job. It was not reward, recognition, or money. Now, I think recognition has an element in it, yet when people feel like they're progressing, they feel better. So what do we do with this? So let me take you to the next slide. Here are some of the coaching culture requirements for 80%. You have to schedule coaching. Here's why, everybody. That number of 80% is brittle, and here's why. We're already starting at a negative number just because of the Gallup organization and just what Tasha Eurich says in her research. When you have scheduled coaching and you focus on strength-based things, you are ahead of most of the organizations in the world. When we coach ad hoc, when we see it and it's in the moment, we tend to gravitate to negative things. We tend to fix things that we feel like we need to address or fix. So the formula is knowledge plus skill plus behavior equals performance divided by business imperatives. So when you're coaching someone and they need to do something that's different, knowledge, do they know what to do? Skill, has it been practiced? Behavior, confidence comes from repetition and positive reinforcement. Most leaders don't do this. Why? We don't have time. And isn't that funny when leaders say we don't have time? If they don't have time, how can they interview for replacements when 50% of our people want to leave our organization? Strength-based. Leaders need to attend best practice sessions, not just for the sake of coaching. See, coaching has gravitated from it would be nice to do to now we have to do it. So we might as well be really good at it. Then we have to be person work centric, employ best practices. What does that mean? See, as a boss, we look at an employee and we think about them doing a job that meets, KPIs and OKRs and imperatives of the company. And that is important. Yet the person has goals. Remember, 50%. 50% are looking to leave. What if 80% were known to wanting to stay? And then we have the motivator. Do we know where people want to go? Do we know what motivates each person? Do we know what their next step is in their career based on what they see? So the requirements are as follows. We've got to look at leaders. Are they progressing and improving and driving improvement? Are employees seeking and improving through feedback, coaching, and mentoring? Is the culture moving in the trends that we've already talked about, reaching those 80% numbers? So here are the stages. Now, this may not be just perfect, but I want you to think about each stage with the following attributes. What's working in that stage? What are some of the possible barriers? How to prevent those things? And how to fix per stage as they are identified. So stage one, we start in a line. I will tell you more than anything, the number one thing that will accelerate your workplace culture, and believe me, they want it too, it's how you craft it internally, is executive sponsorship. If you can get executive participation, everything goes downhill from there, meaning you gain momentum. I really should say you're trending downhill positively, and you have full management participation. Now, remember, you're going to have those 16 to 20% laggers. Then you have to think about the WIF, the systemic thinking inside the company. How do you embed if someone's progressing? How do you embed leaders' ability to coach? How do you reward them? How do you bring that into your culture as it exists today? Stage two, we have to train managers. You have to have a coaching framework. If it's not ours, use somebody else's. Stage two, also, I would encourage you to start a coachability movement, teaching employees how to seek and accept coaching and feedback without retribution, without attitude, without rolling of the eyes, without folded arms. And I promise you, it takes relentless practice. Stage three, when we start to learn and adapt, we're applying coaching to the business imperatives. Remember that KSB. We're having practice sessions scheduled, meaning I've got to coach Joanne. I got to coach Joe next week. And what we do is we have a cadence of practice when we work with our clients. They are always practicing their next coaching conversation with their people. So again, if we can update the systems, the policies, the review, the milestone achievements, and people are learning and adapting, and we can embed that into what we're already doing, then we move into stage four. And this is where we adopt and embed coaching in the workplace. Stage four is 50+% are using scheduled coaching, and 50% of team members are getting coaching. We're measuring progress, and we're measuring the business imperatives. Stage five. This is the ultimate goal. 80% of leaders are scheduling coaching and coaching 80% of their employees. 80+% of employees are showing progress. Now, there's other things here. Part of progress can be, are we talking to their motivator? Do we know where they want to go with their careers? All of those things are embedded within this diagram. So, what do we do as we go forward? So again, the requirements are 80% of leaders are providing scheduled coaching. Think of that at your organization right now. 80% of employees feeling progress and performing coachability learning actions, meaning something we do with our clients. Every week, they have to ask for feedback and journal it. Whether they agree with it or disagree with it, the practice of reception needs to be embedded in the company. 80% of culture feeling progress in career development is moving in the right direction. And there's 80+% retention. So, areas of measurement. Measure progress from the leader to the employee to the team. We measure frequency. We measure practice. We're in the midst of developing an AI tool that actually scores how somebody is coaching. We measure coachability down to each and every employee, and we measure the motivator. What percent of our people do we know their motivator? What percent of our people feel like they're moving successfully? Do 80% of the leaders in your organization know the motivator of each and every employee? Then some of the general requirements. Retention rates. Are recruiting dollars going down? Are we moving towards business imperatives? Now, with all of that being said, that's a lot. I go back to a couple fundamental numbers. Almost 80% of people are at their most motivated state, according to Teresa Amabile at Harvard, when they're progressing. So we have to call people into the office just for the good stuff. Number two, Tasha Eurich reports 85% of people lack self-awareness. So coaching and feedback's tough. That's why when you have the leaders learning how to coach, we've also got to create this coachability movement, this coachability culture of individual contributors, employees, and certainly leaders. We've got to bring them together in a cooperative manner. See, so much of our leadership training is in a downward trajectory, a very hierarchy type of approach. And there's nothing wrong with that. Yet we've also got to get people to ask upwards, like, where am I doing well? What could I do to raise my game? What are 2 things you'd want to do? And I'd love to share this with all of you. Very small company, but I love this story more than anything. I have a very good friend. She's a graphic designer. And it goes to the 80% workplace culture. One decision could have transformed this little marketing agency here in Wisconsin. And my friend said to me, called me up and she said, I got to look for a job. They want to promote me into leadership. And I'm, a lot of trepidation, a lot of nervousness. And I kind of laughed at it. I go, this is a kind of a good thing what they're trying to do. But my friend's motivator had nothing to do with leadership. The company's gesture was thoughtful. It was considerate. It was caring. They wanted to retain her. They didn't want to lose her, but they didn't understand her motivator. They didn't understand the power of progress. See, my friend would self-learn. She's always learning new tools. She loves the creative process. She's actually an introvert. So we would stereotype, right? High creative, graphic design, creating materials. She's an extrovert. No, she's an introvert. And then her friend, an extrovert, really wanted to go into leadership, but was half the talent of graphic design my friend was, yet wanted to go into leadership. So I said to my friend, I said, hold on a second. What they're doing is very, very kind. They misunderstand you. What if you educated them? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, what gets you jacked up? She goes, working with my clients. I don't want to be in a team atmosphere. I don't want to sit there in team meetings and collaborate. I like to work on my own, but I'm constantly looking for new ways to help my clients. I love that process. I said, tell them that. Sits down and tells them, they're like, oh, well, geez, we didn't know. And I'm not criticizing her leaders. It's a small ad agency. And they said, well, we need someone for that position. We thought you were the right person because of how good you are. And she said, it's not for me. She said, but I think my friend would take it and I think she'd be great at it. So then there was a change in that relationship, which we had to coach through. But at the same time, they were pretty supportive of each other. And I think about that little decision. What if my friend had left? Huge amounts of business would have went with her, no matter where she went. If she had accepted the management job, one, she would have hated it. I guarantee you would have hated it. Her friend probably would have left the company. See, when we understand that 80% number, if we understand what motivates people, and then we are constantly bringing them in and pinpointing specifically and authentically and honestly where they're progressing as it relates moving towards their career goal, guess what happens? Retention goes through the roof. That requires conversation. It requires exploration. So when you're thinking about that 80% workplace culture, I go back to this. So when you want to create a coaching culture that people don't want to leave, 80% is the magic number. Almost 80% at their most motivated state, according to Harvard, when they feel like they're progressing. When we create a coaching movement, we're going to have early adopters and then we're going to have early and late majority. It's going to take time. You're always going to have that 16 to maybe 22% who are just naysayers. There's just no getting around it. So what we have to do is think about our workplace culture and have some metrics that we work towards. Number one, leaders should be coaching 80% of their employees. Personally, I think it should be 100, but let's just say it's 80. 80% of our employees should be practicing and getting better at seeking and accepting feedback and coaching. Then when we measure, we should be measuring the leader's ability, their frequency, the power of progress from both the leader and the employee. So when we work with clients, we're constantly measuring those things. And where we find the greatest traction is when executives are involved, when the executives are participating, when leaders are involved, and people feel like they're progressing and improving. Now, someone could argue, wait, you haven't covered this and this and this. And I get that. There's 4,000 things going on inside a workplace culture. So I look at a couple imperatives. Do people feel like they're progressing? If they're progressing, they're happier. Number two, do we know 80% of our employees' career aspirations and goals? And I'll give you this. Last year, we started with a number of companies. Every single company was over 90% not knowing where their employees went. See, we have a relationship. If you're coaching me and I'm a salesperson and you're my sales manager, what are you focused on? My numbers. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, but if you also know I want to become a sales leader and develop my own team because I love to coach team members, wouldn't I perform differently if you were helping me reach that goal while you're also coaching me to the job? So remember the work person-centric slide? So what we have to do is have conversations that sometimes have dual effects. Leaders need help doing that. So a coaching culture is not a training movement. At the major point in my career, at the age of 61, I've come to one major conclusion. If someone doesn't want to coach, I don't coach. I don't want to fight you. Don't coach. But when your people quit on you, people have never, ever quit. And I hope if you're a trainer, you're going to enjoy this humor. No one's ever left in an exit interview and said, nah, I loved my boss. Training department's curriculum really frustrated me. There hasn't been a person who's ever left an organization and said, my boss, Lisa, I just had to leave. She was coaching me too much. Number one reason why people quit typically has very little to do with culture. It has everything to do with that manager. Yet that manager, with a collection of managers across the organization, if 80% were focused on strength-based coaching, scheduled coaching, helping their people move in the direction of where they want to go as it relates to their motivator and their career, and we're using this apparatus called progress to get there, and we're measuring it, we get to 80%, what would happen at your company? So do me a favor. If this intrigues you, contact me on LinkedIn. We have a whole methodology of how we teach to get to that 80% workplace culture. We actually work with you. Certainly we do the training. Certainly we have a train the trainer, but we also have all these tools in place that can also measure. We also teach the coachability. We do all the things that are in the slides. You don't have to do everything with us. But what I'm saying to you is once you build that out and you go through those 5 stages, and let me bring that up again if I could. Here we go. I think this is it. Here we go. So when you start in a line, train and learn, and you get through stage 3, you're probably at about 12 to 24 months, depending on participation. When you get to adopt and embed, and you're at 50% are using scheduled coaching, you're probably at year 3 with full participation. Now, I'm going to make a really crass comment, and I distance myself. And this might come off and really turn people off, but I'm going to say it anyways. I will not be responsible for people's lack of participation and effort. And the reason I say that is we constantly do it to training departments as well. We don't participate, we don't reinforce training, but at the end of the year, we still use the same cliche. We need more training. No, we don't. We need more reinforcement of training. There is no greater tool, greater apparatus to do that than coaching. So think right now, 80% of your leaders are coaching. 80% of your leaders know the motivator of their employee. 80% of your leaders are participating with 80% of your employees in your company, helping their career aspirations and goals. How would that impact your workplace culture? Thank you for your time. Let me know your comments. Put them in. Let us know. I hope this helps. We're really going to continue to stress this 80% coaching culture, this workplace culture, that 80%, especially with the law of diffusion innovation, I think that's the magic number we all need to get towards. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks, everybody.